Here's a quick preview of what's to come. This explains 100% of people who voted for Trump, all of which are actual subhumans deserving of mass murder. Nothing better for a Trump voter fixes them up right. There's nothing about a Trump voter that a bullet to the head can't fix. And that the logical conclusion is that it's morally justifiable to drag such people out of their homes at night and beat them to death in their yard in front of their families. This video is to warn people who watch my EverQuest movie about a popular MMO guild that I was a member of. I didn't want to leave my favorite game forever without telling one last story. So I made a movie about it, and I had so much fun doing that. But I saw how my movie could platform political extremists. I won't have that. Before I go too far, I do apologize to the decent amongst my audience. I miss a time in my childhood where you could watch a movie or a TV show and not be bombarded with some political agenda. I just want to watch a good story that doesn't try to shove some fucking propaganda down my throat. Excuse my language. And for years, I made a point to keep politics out of my YouTube videos because of that. But I don't have a choice anymore. Political bullshit forced its way into my content. And for that, I'm resentful. I'm forced to respond. I will not have my work glorify a hate group. I'm going to talk far more profane than I care to be, so apologies for that. Part 1. What Faceless did wrong. Faceless is an organization of players in a video game called EverQuest. And for context, EverQuest was basically 1999's version of World of Warcraft before World of Warcraft released in 2004. Players have to join guilds like Faceless if they want to take down endgame bosses to get the very best loot in the game. That's why you join them. I joined Faceless for a server released in 2024 called Teak, and I was an active member of Faceless from Teak's launch until 11 months later when I left. I left Faceless for several reasons. The biggest reason, I found a prominent guild leader openly calling for political violence in their communications channel. Several messages calling for the mass murder of all Trump voters. All 77 million of them, there were numerous calls for their death. And the execution of all conservatives, just in general. This was never stopped. It was never punished. And anyone who challenged these calls for violence was harassed, if not just removed from the guild entirely. And this was not some small echo chamber either. Faceless are one of the largest guilds in EverQuest. Their Discord channel had over 1,000 members just for this one server. This is just a satellite branch, not even their full roster. Am I some offended Trump supporter? No. The last time I voted was like 2008. I don't even think it matters, honestly. There's some stuff I like about him and some stuff I don't, just like every other president ever. Anyways, I found it very disturbing. It's disturbing when people go so extreme in their beliefs, right or left, people who go so extremist that they want others violently murdered. I condemn that. Murder is wrong. Calling for murder is wrong. And I will not have my work promote hate groups like that. Part 2. Receipts of what they did wrong. Let's go through a timeline of what happened. What sparked all this? 2 important names. Zaide and Seeger. They are responsible. Zaide is the public face and founder of the guild back in 2011. Faceless is Zaide's guild. Zaide also runs a YouTube channel and Twitch where he talks a lot about his guild's experiences. And Zaide has let Seeger co-lead Faceless for years. Let's start. January 24, EverQuest Game Studio announced new servers would release in May 24. February 24, Zaide posted in the EQ forums announcing that he would make a satellite branch of his guild on one of these new servers. March 24, I joined the Faceless Discord server. It's where all their communications took place. In order to make my movie, I needed to join a raiding guild to get footage. That's why I joined. As well, I had heard rumors of Faceless being one of the most notorious guilds ever in EverQuest. Not because of politics, though. Ruthless gameplay. I wanted to see why they had that reputation, so I applied to join and was accepted. Then April 24, the game studio released the names of the two servers, being Teak and Tormax, and Zaide announced that Faceless would go to the Teak server. May 22nd, 24, both servers release. Zaide and his leadership crew create the Teak version of their guild called Faceless Fury. And on May 31st, I finally joined the guild in game after I got to level 45, like they required. And for months, we played the game, got to max level, did all the raids, no problems. It was a great time. My first conflict with Zaide was on August 29, 24, in DMs, private messages on Discord. We were competing with another guild and losing badly. We lost like 6 fights in a row. No end in sight. And I got really angry that I joined what was advertised as the top raid guild on the server. And we were not just losing, we were getting embarrassed. I think Zaide was on vacation at the time, so he wasn't fully aware of what was going on. I was pissed off. This is his guild. Why is leadership asking for 100+ people to show up every night if we didn't have the tools to win? That's really disrespectful of our time. So I sent angry messages to Zaide that what we were doing is not working. We're beating our head against a wall. I pushed for a radical solution. Zaide disagreed with my solution, and fortunately, it wasn't even needed in the end. The guild pivoted, and we started winning again. It was just a stupid disagreement over a video game. Zaide and I had a chat afterwards to smooth things over. I apologized to him for overreacting to that particular event, and everything was good. Everything was good. Fast forward several months, and this is where things turn sour. In the Faceless Discord, they had a thread/forum called Brain Cell Crematorium. It was open for everyone in the guild to look at and chat within, and Brain Cell Crematorium was the cordoned off section of their chats where you could speak your mind about uncouth subjects, politics, shitposting, and the like. Faceless leadership put a warning label that it was your choice to involve yourself in that Brain Cell Crematorium. That warning label was a cop-out. It was to allow completely unacceptable behavior. It was to allow that to slide. I will get into that soon. The U.S. presidential election on November 6, 24, it made messages fairly volatile in Brain Cell Crematorium, but nothing egregious was said. Just trolling from a few Trump voters and emotional outbursts from Democrats, as you'd expect. Nothing violent, though. Fast forward on January 20th, 25, the day that Trump was formally sworn in as president. That was the day when messages turned violent. I had a disagreement that day with some guild member who was really upset at Trump pardoning some of the January 6er people who had been in prison all this time. And I tried to lower the temperature by explaining to them that this is just how politics are, man. Biden pardoned his friends and family on the way out, and Trump is now pardoning his friends and family on the way in. When you're in charge, you get to bend the rules a little. Like it or not, that's just what every president does. I try not to get upset about things that are outside of my control, and this is one of those circumstances. Stoicism. So that guild member got upset at what I said, maybe interpreting it as support for Trump. It wasn't, but whatever. So I tried to explain myself better. I got it from this book, actually. This book. It's a very interesting way to look at politics. The Populist Delusion by Dr. Nima Parvini. Elite Theory. There's a very simple idea explained in it. The friend-enemy distinction. Friend-enemy distinction. We treat our friends better than our enemies. That's it. So everyone is looking at me saying, duh. So let's apply it. Let's apply the friend-enemy distinction. The people in government, what is their job? Their job is to bend the rules, to help their friends, and punish their enemies. That's all politics is, by the way. To use your power to help your friends and punish your enemies. Definition, politics. Now again, love it or hate it, this is just how the system works. If you get pulled over for speeding, would you rather be a fellow cop or a guy wearing a dark ski mask? This is the friend-enemy distinction. The whole point of elections is you put people into power to do good things for you and bad things to your enemies. Hopefully, right? Hence, this is why presidents always pardon their allies, their friends, their family. You shouldn't be surprised when they do that. Anyway, so back on subject, Trump is formally sworn in as president. I had a misunderstanding with some random guild member. Then it explodes when leadership arrives. Principal Seeger stepped in the room to reply. Seeger saying that everything I said was wrong and then gave no reason why. So I gave an example of the friend-enemy distinction to back my case. In many of the BLM riots, particularly 2020 Kenosha, Wisconsin, looking at that one, the protesters weren't peaceful. They were violent and committed many crimes. Despite that, when law enforcement finally did something about the violent protesters, these protesters were often slapped on the wrist by the courts. Barely any punishment, if at all. Why? Because they were serving power. They were friends to power. It was election season. Explicitly, these BLM riots were protesting police brutality against minority groups. And police brutality, it absolutely happens. I'm not denying that at all. It's still not an excuse for burning down a city, though. The riots also had a secondary purpose. The violence was to scare people into submission, particularly any moderate to right-leaning politician that was in office or any voter about to vote. The point being made to them was that if you dared to oppose the left, you risked having these violent goons come after you personally. This was bullying. Do what we want, or else. And historically, it's common. Leftist elites will use paid actors and paramilitary groups under the table to commit acts of terrorism on their behalf. Why? In order to scare their political enemies into submission. State-sponsored terrorism. That's what it is. And the lackeys who do the dirty work often receive no punishment because they're serving the people who make the rules. They are the judges who run a lot of the courts. Now, contrast those rioters with this kid called Kyle Rittenhouse, a young kid who defended himself against some violent rioters who were trying to murder him. What happened? Rittenhouse's reputation got smeared to high hell in the media. He became unemployable overnight. His court case was a witch hunt. His life was ruined. Why? Because it's important that the leftists in power make sure that you are terrified to oppose them. You will not stand up to them and get away scot-free. Rittenhouse was an enemy and needed to be made an example of. That is why his life was ruined, so that people on the right would get scared and continue to stay obedient. This is terrorism. So then Seeger replied, how was BLM acting in support of power when Trump was president at the time? Good question. I gotcha, Ion. He got me, right? BLM and the left wasn't in charge. Trump was. Trump was the president. Gotcha. Yeah, that's not how power works. Trump was impeached twice during his first term. Scandal after scandal, all hoaxes to derail his presidency. Does that really sound like a dictator who can do whatever he wants? And the real smoking gun, another great thing pointed out in this book, by the way, the real smoking gun. If you want to know who's really in charge of anything, this is how you can tell real quick. Sovereign is he who decides on the exception. Sovereign is he who decides on the exception. In English, what does this mean? The person who's really in charge always has the final say on any decision. If I tell my wife no, but we still do what she wants, my wife is in charge. If Trump signs an executive order and some random judge blocks it, is Trump really in charge? No, absolutely not. If some low-level judge can override the power of the president, is the president truly in charge? No, he is not. Now, there are some things he can do, like the pardons, obviously, but anything substantial, anything that actually threatens the system, that drains the swamp like he said he was going to do, no, he can't do that. The leftist courts blocked him every single time. Trump is allowed to sit in the Oval Office. He's allowed to take that seat. But he's not allowed to do shit other than what the elites want. He's not in charge. The left, the progressives, they are in charge of nearly every major institution and have been in charge since at least FDR made it that way in the 1930s, 1940s. Trump was president during those 2020 riots that I was referencing, but the left was truly in charge, and BLM rioted on the left's behalf. So Principal Seeger got annoyed with me, and he did the only thing left: name-calling and insults. Seeger insulted me personally. Seeger saying to me, "You appear to be fully stupid. Shut up. Shut the fuck up." Over and over. That's not an argument. Insulting people doesn't make you right. Now, I'll openly admit I am a smartass. I do piss people off. I say things I probably shouldn't. And I got a little ego. So I was challenged again, so I continue to give examples to back my argument. Friend-enemy distinction. Epstein, the guy who ran that disgusting island. How he died in prison, strange, but it doesn't really matter in the end. What matters is who Epstein's death benefited. Cui bono. The truth is that Epstein's death was awfully convenient to many powerful people across the globe. Elites who likely did very illegal things on Epstein's island. And Epstein had receipts of it. Elites that Epstein could have destroyed if he had the chance to testify in court. Regardless of how Epstein died, the truth remains the same. He isn't around to talk about it anymore. How convenient for his customers. And just look at the stakes. So what happens if these elites get caught? They lose their power, they lose their money, they lose their reputation, their freedom, they risk prison. The stakes were too fucking high to just sit on your hands and do nothing. The real question is this: why wouldn't certain elites want Epstein dead? I think they had too much to lose. And this is just one example of how you're treated if you're an enemy/threat to the people in charge. Those in power obviously don't want to face punishment for their crimes. They'll do what they got to do to avoid it. And unlike us normal people, these elites, they got a lot of money and they got a lot of strings they can pull to make that happen. And likewise, I gave a second example, how police moved heaven and earth to find Luigi Mangione after he allegedly assassinated the healthcare CEO in New York City. Murders happen every day in New York City, right? No. This particular murder hit different. That CEO was a member of the ruling class, or a proxy of the ruling class. So what happened? News hysteria. The only news for days. Police working endlessly to track the killer. And after Luigi was caught and arrested, the perp walk on TV? Wow.
This killer, Luigi Mangione, pleaded not guilty on state charges, including murder and terrorism. Mangione's attorney says she's concerned about her client's right to a fair trial, specifically citing the very public display when authorities escorted Mangione from the Wall Street heliport to Manhattan federal court last week after he waived extradition from Pennsylvania.
They are literally treating him like he is like some sort of political fodder, like some sort of spectacle. He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. It was absolutely unnecessary. It was like perfectly choreographed. And what was the New York City mayor doing at this press conference, Your Honor? That just made it utterly political.
It was a message. It was a threat to your face. Luigi allegedly killed one guy, and his perp walk was a bigger spectacle than the news of Amber Heard pooping in Johnny Depp's bed. That was pretty silly. It was a bigger news spectacle than even when Trump had his mugshot taken. If you threaten the ruling elites, you will be destroyed and made an example of. Case in point, Trump. He used to be loved before being president. The real estate empire, the reality TV show, the masses loved Trump. But it all changed when he became president in 2016. The assassination attempts and the lawfare put against him. The media and the government were weaponized against him because they thought he was a serious threat to their power. He said he was going to drain the swamp. He wasn't supposed to win in 2016. The power of social media was underestimated back then in 2016. And what we saw later, we saw a crackdown on social media for the 2020 election. We saw mass censorship. We saw bannings. Twitter banned the fucking president, all right? That does not sound like someone who's in charge, who can do whatever he wants. So when I pointed out these observations, a different guild member compared me to the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. I got compared to the Oklahoma City bomber, Timothy McVeigh. No. Seriously? I'm not talking about some anti-government conspiracy. I'm not even opposing the government. I'm just explaining what they do to threats. I'm trying to explain that you shouldn't be surprised when elites bend the rules and do shady shit to protect themselves. It's not a conspiracy. You'd do the same thing if you were in their shoes. It's ugly, but it's just how the world works. And importantly, these observations I'm pointing out, these things I'm saying, they do not make me want to murder anybody. I'm not McVeigh. I'm not Kaczynski. I'm not a terrorist. I'm just some smart-ass YouTuber that nobody gives a shit about. That's who I am. I'm not changing the world. I'm changing a 2-year-old's diaper, dude. Come on. Ridiculous. Anyways, then Seeger. Let's get serious now. Anyways, then Seeger proceeded to say this to try to shut me up. A significant portion of people want to be slaves, so they don't have to struggle thinking for themselves. This explains 100% of people who voted for Trump, all of which are actual subhumans deserving of mass murder. This explains 100% of people who voted for Trump, all of which are actual subhumans deserving of mass murder. I didn't even process what Seeger said at that moment. I just called him out for insulting me. Telling people to shut up is rude, and especially telling a teammate to shut up, that's pretty rude to do. Then Seeger called me impolite for sharing easily debunked conspiracy theories. How did you debunk them? You made no argument. You just insulted me. Seeger continuing on. Somewhere along the way, you guys, conservatives, lost the understanding that being deliberately stupid is actually rude, and that the rest of society is under no obligation to respect it. To which Seeger finished by posting a picture of a swinging noose, captioning it, "Nothing better for a Trump voter. Fixes them up right." This explains 100% of people who voted for Trump, all of which are actual subhumans deserving of mass murder. This is wildly inappropriate behavior. Behavior that gets you put on FBI watch lists. Behavior that gets you fired from your job when HR finds out. Behavior that gets you removed from any leadership position, including in MMO guilds. I'm making this video because none of that happened. There were no consequences for his words. Now, I completely understand criticizing Trump because of failed promises, betrayals. He was supposed to end the forever wars immediately, deport more illegals, the H-1B crap we're seeing. Whatever stuff happens in the future he doesn't do, I get being angry with Trump for not doing what he promised to do. I get being angry with Trump for the crude way he talks at times. That's totally understandable. That's completely valid. Those are valid complaints. But this language coming from Seeger, there's no argument being made. It's just blind hatred. You need to die. That's all he's saying. No discussion. I've heard about crazies like this, but it's another thing to interact with it first person. And what's most concerning to me is that a crazy person was in charge. They can do a lot of damage. One moment I joined a guild to play my favorite video game, and next thing I know, I can name a nut job who actually wants to murder me because my observations offend him. So that's a taste of Seeger. There were 4 other people in guild leadership. How did they react to this? Nothing. Crickets. The founder of the guild, the big boss, Zaide, 5 days later, January 25th, 2025, Zaide got into a political argument with a guild member called Caligula. I've chatted with Caligula. Caligula was an average Trump supporter, sometimes posting crap to troll on Brain Cell Crematorium. Usual shitposting on the internet. Both sides do it. It's whatever. Anyways, Caligula openly supported Trump, and Zaide openly kicked Caligula from the guild because of it. Zaide saying this, "I think I'm going to kick all the Trump people out now. At least the regulars in this Brain Cell Crematorium channel." Zaide, in other words, is saying, treating people with fairness and respect, we don't do that shit here at Faceless. You're only allowed to be a leftist here. Zaide explained why. He told Caligula that EverQuest is too easy to play with people you don't like. That's it. So Caligula didn't break any rules. Zaide only kicked him for his beliefs. Political beliefs that were non-violent, by the way. So those beliefs were a problem, but not Seeger's death threats. This is a perfect example, actually. It's proving my case. The friend-enemy distinction. The people in charge get to bend the rules. Caligula became an enemy, so Zaide used his power to kick him from the guild for bullshit. Zaide was so offended that someone had a different belief than him that no discussion, kick him out. Really cringe behavior from Zaide. So I dug deeper, and shocker to nobody, Zaide is a massive hypocrite. 2 months earlier, November 7th, 2024, Zaide saying this: I don't know about you guys, but I'm about winning in the game. I'm not trying to do things that lower my chances of winning, but there are tons of people in this guild, for instance, who I'd love to kick out, but I keep them because they help me produce success. And Zaide was right. We needed everybody to defeat our rival in the game. The competition was intense at that point, and I respected that from Zaide. The importance of checking your beliefs at the door so the team can win. I support that wholeheartedly. But Zaide's words didn't match his actions when he kicked Caligula out of the guild just for his non-violent political beliefs. Now, if Caligula was an actual far-right Nazi, I would have supported Zaide kicking him from the guild. Kick Nazis out, absolutely. But Caligula wasn't a Nazi. He was just a generic Trump supporter. Basically a 90s Democrat. They just want the rate of change to go slower. If you want America to go back to how it was in the 90s, the 2000s, whatever, it doesn't make you a Nazi. If you miss listening to Nickelback and Britney Spears on the radio while you ate a $2 Big Mac meal from McDonald's, that does not make you a Nazi. That makes you nostalgic for when times were fucking normal. We are not normal times anymore. Okay, so January 25th, 2025. The day Zaide kicked Caligula from the guild. Some members of the guild confronted leadership, saying that maybe allowing politics isn't a good idea. Maybe we should just shut down Brain Cell Crematorium. It's creating hatred between guild members that doesn't help us win in the game. Preach. Why wasn't it always like that? Whose dumb idea was it to allow politics? Well, here's the answer. A third guild leader of Faceless called Clucifer explained. Actually, it's better to allow these talks in this cordoned off part of Discord than it to spill out into general comms. And remember, you don't have to look. So people are calling for murdering me and I'm supposed to ignore it? Is that your actual fucking argument, Clucifer? Clucifer over here saying, I know people are saying they want you to violently die, but don't get mad about it. It's been a while since I've seen an argument that's that fucking stupid. Clucifer explained. He explained that despite leadership's efforts in the past to enforce a no politics rule, leadership couldn't stop people, so they gave up. Devil's advocate, okay, I get why they might feel that way. It is work to enforce the rules, but I got 2 questions for you, Clucifer. 1, why do politics need to be discussed in a chat channel about a fucking video game from 1999? There's places to discuss politics. This is not it. And question 2, your job in leadership is to enforce rules. So you're refusing to stop people calling for murder because it's too much work to right-click the message and delete it? You don't see a problem with death threats, Clucifer? That doesn't cross any lines? If you don't want to enforce the rules, Clucifer, then don't be in fucking leadership. It's the job description. Then a guild member followed up and made the most reasonable statement of the day. There's a difference between politics and straight insults calling for people to be murdered. I like that there's an isolated place for shitty conversations, but there's plenty of shit in Brain Cell Crematorium that goes way beyond that. Exactly. That's the problem. I don't care if you post stupid memes, shit post, whatever. I don't care if you disagree with my ideas, but I do care if you disrespect me personally. That's kind of rude to do to a teammate. And I especially care when you call for killing people like me and millions of others. That's not rude. That's unacceptable. And I publicly agreed. the next day with that guild member. I think leadership saying, just don't look in brain cell crematorium. Shitposts are one thing, arguing politics, whatever. But when you push for murder, mass murder, if that doesn't cross the line, then what fucking does? I mean, I don't care if it's in a sectioned off area, if it's some weird area of the Discord. That still doesn't excuse it. And I will look at it every damn time because it's a threat to my fucking safety. February 1st, 25, I still couldn't believe Seeger said what he said. And I asked him bluntly, do you actually hate people that voted for Trump? He said 100%. There's nothing about a Trump voter that a bullet to the head can't fix. That was my mistake. Believe them when they say it. I asked, so Seeger, you weren't joking about the news thing? Him replying, laughing my ass off, sir, I would get an erection if we started lynching Trump voters. If in case you were confused on my position, let's be clear to any people who voted for Trump in this Faceless Discord, to the very last one, you are scum. I wouldn't piss on you if you were on fire. Blah, blah, blah. You get the point. This explains 100% of people who voted for Trump, all of which are actual subhumans deserving mass murder. So that's enough of Seeger for now. So Zaide made Seeger a co-guild leader. What relationship do they have? Why is Seeger allowed to say stuff like this? I dug deeper and I saw Zaide comment on November 6, 24. One should safely assume anything of note that I, Zaide, know is also known by Seeger. So Zaide and Seeger do talk privately about many things. They've kicked people who've openly supported Nazism, which again, I agree with, kicked the Nazis out. Far right and far left should be removed, but they only seem to take issue with one side. Strange. Zaide and Seeger have years and years of a working relationship together on a previous server called CeeLo around 2019. When Zaide eventually stopped playing there, he gave the primary leadership reins to Seeger. And hell, let's hear from the man himself. For context, this clip is Zaide talking about his guild racing to be the first to finish an expansion. I showed this race at the very end of my movie.
Rich Raids got done with Tipped first. So I had a lot of fun. Plus, I got to raid with Seeger, which was always a treat to raid with him. He's one of the funnier guys to raid with. He's good in comms and everything like that. And unfortunately, even though we've been guilded for like years and years across all these other branches of Faceless and this one, Seeger and I never really get to raid together unless it's an expansion launch or something, because we're both leading our own splits normally, which totally sucks. Yeah, I mean, I love raiding with some of my best friends in EQ end up being officers, and I can't play the game with them anymore. You know what I mean? Once they're officers, because they have their own responsibilities they got to take care of for the guild. So we all end up being super good friends, and then we're always all in different splits. So we're like Discord friends who help manage the same guild, but we're in different departments. It feels like. But yeah, that was our GOD launch.
This video was put out a long time after I left the guild, so Zaide and Seeger were still on great terms after I left. So what are Zaide's beliefs? We saw Zaide kicking Caligula from the guild for supporting Trump, but Zaide never explicitly called for murdering Trump voters like Seeger did. And good decision on his part, because, a little secret for you, Zaide is active U.S. military. I think he's Navy intelligence. I don't think it's allowed for U.S. soldiers to call for murdering U.S. citizens. So Zaide wasn't explicit like Seeger was. But it still looks bad to me that Zaide never stopped Seeger either. You don't have a problem with anything he said. So since Seeger has known Zaide for all these years, I asked, does Zaide agree with you, Seeger? And Seeger responding, saying that Zaide probably has far harsher views on Trump and his voters than you think. He just doesn't believe in expressing them to a large audience. Oh, of course not, buddy. Of course he doesn't. One, that hurt recruitment for his precious guild. And two, you can't call for killing people who voted for the president when the president is your fucking boss. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So beyond guild kicking Caligula for supporting Trump, what else has Zaide messaged publicly? His own words. November 7th, 2024, Zaide talking. I want to go on my Facebook and tell every person who's a Republican to unfriend me. But I stop myself because it accomplishes nothing for me. So why did you stop when you removed Caligula? I don't understand. So what can I prove about Zaide? I can prove 3 things. 1, Zaide was present and communicated in that same Discord thread in Brain Cell Crematorium where Seeger repeatedly promoted mass murder. It was hard to miss those messages. 2, Zaide does have proven hatred towards Trump and people who voted for Trump, like Seeger does. And 3, Zaide had the ability to take down those murder posts made by Seeger, but Zaide never did while I was still in the guild. And Zaide still referred to Seeger as a friend far after I left.
Plus, I got to raid with Seeger, which was always a treat to raid with him.
Zaide had people calling for murder in his guild, and Zaide showed no problem with it at all. This is just as much of Zaide's fault as Seeger's, because Zaide put Seeger in power and allowed him to stay there. Zaide wanted Seeger in power. Now, I want to shift gears, sharing some other gems from Brain Cell Crematorium. Seeger responding to some video of where President Trump was sitting in a chair. Seeger saying this: I wish this video ended with someone coming up behind Trump, cinching a plastic bag over his head, and holding it there for about 5 minutes. It's time for people like that to be put to bed. Is that a crime? I'm actually curious. A guild member posted a picture in Brain Cell Crematorium about United States-backed right-wing coups in South America. Lies. No. The U.S. wasn't trying to force South American countries to turn far right. No, absolutely not. For context, we were so scared of a far-right regime in the 1940s that we sided with communists to take them down. Stopping the far right was priority number 1. The U.S. didn't want far-right regimes in Latin America. But priority number 2, the U.S. did not want communist regimes down there either. That's why some of the coups happened. Most of the dates listed in that graphic were during the Cold War. Something was going on in the Cold War. In 1963, Soviet Russia snuck nuclear missiles into Cuba. There were nuclear missiles aimed at us 90 miles off the coast of Florida. Let me rephrase that. The world almost ended in 1963 because the U.S. allowed communists to get too close. So is it any surprise that the U.S. didn't like communist regimes in its backyard? Absolutely not. That's not some evil far-right conspiracy. That was fucking survival. Thank God they took issues with that shit, or we wouldn't be here. And I especially took issue with the picture labeling the coup in 1973 Chile as one of these events. The U.S. had very little to do with that event. Chile in the 1960s up to 1970, the economy was fine. The Chilean people were doing okay. And in 1970, there's a presidential election. It was a very big year for the left. For the first time ever, an avowed communist, Salvador Allende, was elected president by the people. Now, it was a 3-way tie for president, but it doesn't matter. He still won. And the significance is that every communist leader before Allende only got into power by violent revolution. Allende's win was a huge milestone for the left because Allende was peacefully put into power by the people by democratic vote. Then, according to the graphic, some horrible right-wing dictator, Pinochet, kicked Allende out of power because the U.S. told him to. End story. That's it. Yeah, no, it's missing some important details. Once sworn in, President Allende immediately instituted communist economics. And what happened? Basically, the government spent a bunch of money that it didn't have to give people free shit. Because all communists are, by definition. Communists are people who want free shit, but don't want to work for it. That's all communism is. People who want free shit and don't want to work for it. But there's a problem with communism. You see, the last time I checked, nothing's free. Somebody has to work to make the things you want. So what happens next? I could go on forever, but let's skip to the end. If you read a book called The Gulag Archipelago, it proved that the Soviet Union only survived as long as it did because of literal slave labor. Something like 1 in 10 Soviet citizens had been forced to do slave labor in no-shit concentration camps. 8 to 10 year stints. And this was if the prisoners, the Zeks, as they were called, that was if they even got out alive. Many didn't. And heck, the Soviets, they actually invented the atomic bomb in a concentration camp. The police would roam around and arrest people for bogus charges because they needed to fill the quota for slave labor in the concentration camps. Or not enough stuff would be made. There would be shortages. The United States ended slavery in 1865. Literal fucking slavery existed in Europe until 1991. Without slavery, communism always fails. That is what this book proved. People like to say that China is communist. It was, but they're now communist in name only. They're a one-party dictatorship with state-controlled capitalism. And it's been that way since the 70s. They adopted capitalistic reforms. And names can be deceiving. So North Korea, it calls itself the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. 3 words coded as democracy. But everyone knows that North Korea is a dictatorship, okay? Names can be deceiving. Speaking of that, so an aside, in the United States, many on the left call themselves progressives. That term got hijacked. It got co-opted. A progressive today is often coded language for communist. The Gulag Archipelago book was so damning to communist ideology when it came out that communists in the West could no longer be taken serious. So many of them rebranded as progressives. Prior to this book, the American public was largely unaware of the atrocities being committed in the Soviet Union. People thought communism worked. Anyways, Allende's policies in Chile caused Chile to spend money it didn't have, print money it didn't have. It caused hyperinflation. Prices skyrocketed. Take this loaf of bread. Imagine it was $1 in 1970. In 1973, and 3 years later, this loaf of bread is $22 fucking dollars. $1 to $22 in 3 years. And that was if there was even bread to buy. The prices of everything skyrocketed, not just bread. Nobody could afford shit. So that's how bad Allende fucked Chile's economy in 3 years. Then there was the far-left terrorism. Allende had a paramilitary group called Movimiento de Izquierda Revolucionaria, MIR. Kind of similar, analogous to Antifa or BLM today, but far more violent. They use political violence and murder to scare people and scare local leaders into submission. at points going from farm to farm, murdering entire families, murdering little children, little boys and girls in their cribs, because they needed to reclaim the land for the people. Communists don't believe in private ownership, especially land ownership. And that's not even mentioning the food supply issues. In response to the shortages, the government would give out ration cards to the people, and you would go to your local hop with your card to get your food. The hop, the JAP, was like a government-run grocery store that had a Communist Party official as the overseer, as the manager. And if you had any reputation of criticizing the government, or any of your family did, or they just didn't like you, there was a non-zero risk that that party official would just say, "Fuck you, starve." And there was nothing you could do. Many of these families had to pawn off family heirlooms and jewelry at black markets just so they didn't starve to death. And that was if the government didn't just outright murder you, which frequently happens in communist takeovers, by the way. They eventually murder everyone who they view as a threat. If the communists take over in the United States, it's going to be a bloodbath. Get ready for it. So Chileans are broke, starving. People are getting murdered by state-sponsored terrorists. Food is being withheld if you had the wrong opinions. And after 3 years of pain and suffering inflicted upon the Chilean people, in August 73, a boiling point is reached. A majority in Chile's Congress begged the military to kick out President Allende. And next month, September 73, General Pinochet did. In the coup d'etat, President Allende takes himself out like a little bitch. He actually used a rifle that Cuba's Fidel Castro had gifted him. And that's the end of the story, right? The evil right-winger Pinochet becomes dictator, and things get even worse. That's what most simple Google searches will tell you about Pinochet. That's not the whole story. In the overthrow, Pinochet murders a lot of people. He murders, I think, 2,000 to 3,000, but it could be more. As a military general, he had a list of soldiers who were openly far left or had suspected ties to the far left terrorists of Allende, guerrilla fighters in a possible civil war. Pinochet feared they would become a problem, so he just handled it right then and there. Pinochet murdered a lot of people. But despite Allende's death, his paramilitary group continued to commit frequent acts of terrorism throughout Pinochet's 17-year dictatorship in the 70s and 80s, trying to violently overthrow the government. Bombings, armed robberies, murders, and attacks against critical infrastructure, power outages, open shootouts with the military and police in the street, terrorism that got so bad that Pinochet had to institute a curfew to reestablish order. A curfew because that's when most of the far leftists attack. That's when criminals like to act. Under the cover of night, of course. It's easier to get away. But enough of that. Just how terrifying was Pinochet's dictatorship? Well, here's a Chilean who lived through it firsthand. A guy who was actually arrested by the evil right-wing dictator.
That's why the left says that people who lived under the Pinochet dictatorship lived in fear all the time. I lived in the Pinochet dictatorship. I didn't live in fear. I was once picked up by a military patrol in Chile in 1984. I was 16 years old. I was picked up and I was held overnight in a military prison. Okay? I've been dining out on this story for years. And the fact of the matter is, it sounds really truculent. You sound like, holy shit, you were in a Pinochet jail. What happened? Did they torture you? Did they waterboard you? Did they beat you with a truncheon? What happened? And well, what happened was I was coming home from my girlfriend's and I'd missed the last bus. And there was a curfew at the time because of leftist terrorist attacks that were going on nightly, armed terrorist attacks with bombings. That's why there was a curfew. Anyway, I missed my last bus. I was walking home from my girlfriend's, right? And, the military patrol swung by and they spotted me, and they all over the bullhorn, they said, stop where you are, please. And they came right up and said, what's your name? And they checked my ID, and they put me in the back of the truck, right, of the military patrol truck. And they took me to this prison. It was a neighborhood jail at the cops. And they stuck me in a jail with all the other minors. Because since I was 16, I was considered a minor. They stuck me in with all the other kids who roughly the same thing had happened to them. And they called up my mom. And I could hear my mom yelling on the other side that she was going to kill me the next morning when she picked me up. Okay? And that was very humiliating. And anyway, the next morning, I got picked up by my mom. And I was like crying like a little bitch because I knew that my mom was going to be really pissed at me, and she was. And that was that. It was no big deal. It was no big deal. Okay? But of course, you tell the story one way, and it sounds like, oh my God, something horrible happened to the guy. You tell it another way with the full details, and you realize it was all bullshit. Pinochet did a lot of things that were bad. But the problem with Pinochet is that he did a lot of things that were good. The Pinochet dictatorship outright said that it was a right-wing dictatorship. It didn't fuck around. It didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. It says, we are a right-wing dictatorship. And they implemented right-wing policies. Free market ideas of free movement of capital and free movement of labor, lowering tariffs and trade barriers, privatizing the retirement system, creating individual retirement accounts, privatizing the healthcare system, and creating two parallel systems, one public for the poor and one private for everybody else, and a private system that is extraordinarily good, extraordinarily cheap. Look at OECD figures where Chile appears. It's among the most efficient healthcare systems of all the OECD countries and the cheapest for the consumer. Chile spends less on healthcare than practically any other OECD country. Compare that to the United States, which is the most expensive healthcare system of all the OECD countries. Pinochet did a whole bunch of things. For instance, Pinochet threw all of the Chilean oligarchy into jail in 1980-81. Yeah, there was a big financial crisis. A lot of banks did a lot of stupid shit, illegal shit. And Pinochet swept them all up, all of these oligarchs, all of these people who own these banks, and tossed them into jail. And, nationalized the banks, wiped out the shareholders, i.e. these oligarchs, and reorganized the financial system. And, went through, solved the financial crisis of 1980-81, which was a huge deal in Chile. And all of those oligarchs, I remember watching TV, and they were in this prison called Capuchino. And they were there, and they couldn't get out, and their lawyers would go in and out, and the press would be waiting, to interview them. And all of these oligarchs, these big names, the equivalent of, like, say, I don't know, Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, all of these guys, Rockefellers, the equivalent of Rockefellers and the equivalent of DuPonts, they were all in jail because the Pinochet dictatorship determined that what they had done was illegal and tossed them into jail, right? It didn't put up with, corrupt oligarchs. And that's why in Chile, the oligarchs have always hated Pinochet. That's a dirty little secret. But anyway, there were a lot of mistakes that the Pinochet government did, the Pinochet dictatorship did. For instance, there were a lot of murders that were, unnecessary and politically stupid, okay? Not to mention, of course, immoral. There were a lot of measures that the government implemented that didn't work out in the end. But all in all, the Pinochet dictatorship improved the lives of the average Chilean citizen. And we can point to the statistics. By any metric, the Chilean people's lot improved between 1973 and 1990. By every single metric. Literacy, life expectancy, electrification, infant mortality, everything. Everything improved during those 17 years.
Okay, so anyways, Pinochet is absolutely a dictator who did horrible, horrible things. But as for why he got into power in 1973, the coup, it wasn't the United States. It wasn't some far-right conspiracy. It wasn't some CIA bullshit, even though they had a little bit of a hand to play. The reason why Allende got removed from power was because the economy was destroyed by his communist policies. People were starving. And when people starve, governments get overthrown. Simple. So does this mean I support Pinochet? No, absolutely not. This is just something I know a little about, and that graphic was egregiously lying. And by the way, so I've criticized communism very hard in this video, but I'm not saying that capitalism is perfect either. It creates immense inequality. Inequality that drives a lot of conflict and a lot of resentment in our society. But inequality is just a fact of life. You can't get rid of it. Many of us will never have the talent to play in the NFL or got the brains to be a rocket scientist. And that's okay. That means you probably have skills that other people don't. Places where you're better than them. That is your opportunity. And that's just how the world is. It's impossible to make things completely fair. It sucks, but that's how things are. Capitalism is not perfect, but it doesn't depend on slavery like communism. Capitalism doesn't depend on putting a gun to your head to force you to work. Capitalism doesn't even depend on you agreeing with it. If I had a choice, I'd much rather die from getting too fat in a capitalist society than die from starving in a communist one. We live in such a crazy world where the food is so addictive that people have to take drugs so they eat less. The Ozempic and semaglutide, all that stuff, the GLP-1 agonists. That's capitalism. That's freaking nuts, man. Although I wouldn't call our American economy as capitalist, honestly. The government has too much interference. I'd call it, you have the term fascist thrown around a lot. I was educated that the term fascist, what it actually means is state-controlled capitalism. You have a free market where people are allowed to make businesses and operate privately, but only with the government's permission. You're only allowed to do what the government wants. And if you don't, the government will shut you down. Where a true capitalist society, the government could not get involved at all. I think we falsely blame capitalism for the effects of government interference. The government fucking with things that they really shouldn't be fucking with. But regardless. Anyways, I pointed out the economic side of Pinochet's rule. And Seeger said horrible things to me. I'm not a Nazi like you are. And yet here you are minimizing a far-right dictator. Blah, blah, blah. You could literally be a German Hitler apologist in the late 30s. Again, that's not an argument. That's just name calling. Seeger, you're the one calling for murder like Hitler. I'm saying murder is wrong. I'm not minimizing a dictator by telling the historical truth. I'm disputing a graphic with false information. And context. Now, I'm Christian by faith, but not shown here is I told Seeger how I got a little Jewish ancestry. I'm actually an alumnus of a Jewish fraternity, Alpha Epsilon Pi. It's pretty anti-Semitic to call me a Hitler supporter, which Seeger proceeded to double down, still calling me a Nazi. Also being afraid to use a light switch, like Orthodox Jews, on Saturday on the Sabbath, doesn't give you an immunity card for being a Nazi sympathizing fuck. And they call the right racist. I really set him off. So, why does the far left push this communist shit when it obviously doesn't work? I think there's 3 reasons. The first, it's how they identify their allies. They'll openly state beliefs that are irrational, beliefs that are objectively false to signal to each other that they are a friend. This is how they distinguish between their friends and their enemies. And the second reason, normal people understand that they need to fit in with the people in charge, aka the left-wing bias that's all over our institutions like media, entertainment, academia, corporations, and government bureaucracies. If you want to survive and thrive in our system, you need to bend the knee to those in power. If you want to get along and get paid good money in this current leftist system, you have to bend the knee. And the problem is you have people like me who are either really autistic or really smart. I'm just autistic. And so autistic, we simply don't understand lying. The idea that normal people lie all the time so they can fit in better. Who wants to live in a world where everyone lies to each other? But that's just how the world is. People do lie. And the final reason, the third reason why people push these leftist beliefs that don't work, I can't say this any better, so I got to use this clip.
A belief in the ideology is the only way to achieve this great and wondrous future. And that's the whole point of the ideology. The ideology is a fairy tale telling its adherents that by following the ideology, eventually at some point in the future, you'll reach this manic nirvana. You'll be happy. You'll be in a earthly paradise. That's the whole point of it. Communism is basically a Garden of Eden. That's the whole point of it. I mean, religions have the same thing. And many people have pointed out, and you don't have to be particularly astute to point out the fact that Leninism, communism, and its different iterations of communism, but all of them espouse a paradise, just like religions espouse a paradise. But of course, in the religion, you reach the paradise after you die. But here in Leninism, you reach that paradise in life eventually. You might not live long enough to see it, but it will happen on this earth sometime eventually. Of course, it never has. It can't ever happen, but that's not the point of this. The point is to understand what Leninism is. Okay, that's the point of this conversation. Now, Leninism also possesses the belief that all methods are fair to achieve this utopia or fight those who disagree with this utopia, including distortion of information, cheating, and murder, and in slavery, and all kinds of other horror stories, okay? Which makes complete sense. I mean, think about it. You're working towards the creation of a paradise on earth. That's your goal. You are trying to create a paradise on earth, this communist paradise on earth. One day we will transcend socialism and achieve this communist utopia. And that's a wondrous thing. Everybody will be happy. No one will suffer. No one will go hungry. You know, everybody will have everything that they could ever want. It will be wonderful. It'll be a nirvana, a paradise. So, you know, if I have to, you know, cheat you out of whatever, that's okay. You know, I'm by any means necessary, man. I'm gonna get this this nirvana, this magic land, this paradise. So if I cheat you, or I lie to you, or, you know, if I just, you know, go ahead and just shoot you in the head, you know, just a little bit, you know, big fucking deal, you know, it's a price worth paying to achieve paradise. Am I right or am I right? Let's have a show of hands. Hey, you fuckers who are listening to me, yeah, raise your hands if you think that it's okay to shoot anybody to achieve a nirvana. Raise your hands right now. I want to see a show of hands. Isn't it great that to achieve nirvana, we should just shoot people? Shoot whoever opposes us. Don't you agree? Yeah, lots of hands there. Yeah, you'd be good Leninists. That's the point, of course, you know. I mean, it's a horrifying notion, the notion that to lie and cheat and steal and murder are acceptable in order to achieve some paradise, okay? And that's absurd, of course. It's absurd and it's horrifying, especially because that nirvana has never been achieved and cannot be achieved. And it's human nature. We will never achieve a nirvana on earth because the life of a human being is always one of struggle and unhappiness and dissatisfaction. And it's because of that unhappiness and dissatisfaction that we strive for a better life. So obviously, that will never arrive. But you see how the logic of the Leninist operates. They are going after something good. The more higher the level of the people, the more cynical you might think them to be. But it's very interesting. When you study, for instance, the life of Stalin, he really believed that one day this communist paradise would be achieved. And Stalin was a fucking mass murderer. He is a man who created, well, he didn't create it, it was Lenin who created the Gulag system, but he amplified it. I mean, he turned that fucker up to 11. But he really believed that one day they would achieve the communist utopia. They believed it. He believed it. And of course, that explains why he could sleep like a baby every night. But okay, again, that's the Soviet system, the economic system, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in Leninism, okay? Now, finally, what's important to understand about Leninism is that it had a rigid hierarchy among themselves based on conformity to the ideology. Everybody in the hierarchy had to believe in the ideology.
So some other selected posts, Seeger saying this, based on the number of extra chromosomal American voters who decided we needed to destroy our country over some grocery prices being 20% higher in cost than they were 5 years ago. So Seeger is saying that many Trump voters had Down syndrome because they didn't like how food was getting more expensive. Me asking Seeger if veterans are bad people. Seeger saying most veterans are bad, yes. Unless we're talking about World War II veterans because they're Chads. And Seeger expanding. I think veterans, when they retire, should get a peanut butter sandwich and a bus ticket home. I don't want them having a penny beyond that. Veterans are mostly Trump-tards, and Trump-tards deserve nothing. Racist, ableist, hating veterans. I mean, does this guy have a checklist of bigotry that he's going through? Let's go for the high score, right? Proof of the echo chamber that leadership created. Not Seeger saying this, but a regular guild member. Hopefully right-wing shit like that radicalizes more people into the idea that the people who call themselves the Republican Party are now basically out to actively harm others. And that the only logical conclusion is that it's morally justifiable to drag such people out of their homes at night and beat them to death in their yard in front of their families. Yikes. Another guild member, Valia, saying, "Remember when conservatives pretended to believe, I may not like what you say, but I'll defend your right to say it? Yeah, we need to burn out all conservatism, or the planet and the human species is doomed. Conservatism is fundamentally bad brain, anti-progress, anti-learning, anti-change." Do you think the concentration camp guards got offended when the Holocaustees didn't smile at them? That is what it's like to be a Trumper cultist and act shocked and offended when people say you don't deserve oxygen for supporting a fascist imbecile. So Caligula gets kicked from the guild for non-violent post, but shit like this is acceptable? Well, it was. Because the communists were in charge of Faceless, and they got to make the rules. But unfortunately for them, you can't shut me up. And the very last clip. So I left Faceless in April of 2025, and this is a talking 7 months later, in November 2025, about how to run a guild. And notice in the right-hand corner of the Discord that my boy Seeger is still a guild leader. And in the same video, you can see that Brain Cell Crematorium is still there in the Faceless Discord channel. Same Brain Cell Crematorium that caused all these problems.
You've done all the things that we've talked about so far. You are like 90% there to a successful guild. Things will be relatively smooth. Now, remember, there's a video I did a long time ago called The Drama Tax. I'm not going to reiterate too much, but you should go watch it. You're going to have members, especially as a new guild, they're going to flock to you who can't function in society. They're going to be people who are flashpoints. They're going to be sources of conflict. Just kick them out of the guild. They're not worth it. People like that who think they're better than other people or just cause a lot of drama and infighting, just you decide what your culture is going to be. But like we said, nobody is good enough. Nothing is hard enough here that we need to have negative personalities for player skill. We don't need to balance that.
But enough. Despite what I've shown here, most of the folks in Faceless, the average member, they were great people. I really did like them. And I like Faceless when it was about putting our differences aside to work together. But Sometimes hatred and bigotry are so strong that nothing can overcome it. And again, it's not about being left or right politically. It's disgusting when either side goes so far that it calls for murder. I made this video because of two failures. One, Zaide should have banned politics in his guild. Why do politics need to be talked about in a 25-year-old video game? But even then, politics wasn't necessarily a problem until number 2 happened. Zaide should have banned Seeger the moment he advocated murder. I mean, if Zaide just did one of those two things, I would not have made this video. Zaide would have been the good guy in my book. Thank you for kicking the nut jobs out. But he didn't do that. Zaide did not kick the nut jobs out. Zaide empowered the nut jobs. It's time someone holds them accountable. I'm not sure if it was Asmongold who said this, but if you refuse to police the extremists in your group, you will be defined by them. That is what happened to Faceless. If you refuse to police the extremists in your group, you will be defined by them. It's so disappointing because I like Zaide. He seems like a good father, a good husband, definitely an elite guild leader. I won't argue with that. I really enjoy his YouTube videos. His passion for the game far exceeds mine. I love this game, but this guy seems like he loves it on another level above me. But I lost so much respect for him when I saw how his politics poisoned the way that he treated his teammates. I lost respect for him when he allowed Seeger to run his guild despite the unacceptable things he said repeatedly. I don't care what your politics are. Calling for murder is wrong, and that needs to be stopped every single time. They're going to probably come after me for this. Fine. I'll accept the shit that comes my way for saying murder is wrong. But, normal people aren't like this. Normal people know that murder is wrong, and calling for this shit is wrong. If they're offended, then fuck them. I think there's a severe lack of empathy in recent years. Not enough people are trying to walk in the other side's shoes, understanding where they're coming from, the circumstances that shape their opinion. There are good reasons why people hold liberal beliefs, like people wanting to take care of our sick and weak. They need help, absolutely. We're not savages. We're civilized creatures, and it's good to have some compassion, or even the hope that we could create a better world. That's noble. Absolutely, we should dream for a better world. Now contrast that with conservative beliefs. The importance of making sure that what we're doing even fucking works. Are we running the economy in a way that doesn't make people starve? That's important too, We fucked up if bread turns to $22. There's good reasons why people hold both conservative and liberal beliefs. But we run into a problem when empathy stops. Because at one point, Zaide said he takes a large issue with Trump's environmental policies. There we go. That's something I can work with. We only have one Earth. Of course, we can't be so focused on profit that we destroy the planet. Obviously, that's true. But likewise, Zaide should have empathized with the right-wing perspective. They don't like seeing messages calling for their murder. It's a sensitive topic for them, especially after Charlie Kirk. I mean, thank God I wasn't in the guild for when that happened. I don't even want to know what they said about that. A modern-day Martin Luther King was trying to bring understanding between both sides, trying to lower the temperature, and he was murdered in front of his wife and 2 young children. And his daughter was so scared after she heard the gunshot that she ran to her deceased father for safety. That image in my head, unacceptable. And this kind of rhetoric, this kind of language that came from Seeger is exactly what leads to shit like this. It needs to stop. I doubt I've changed anyone's political beliefs in this, but I wanted to give a heads up to anyone in my audience who is normal, who's old school left before it went crazy, who's moderate or conservative leaning. If you're thinking about joining that guild, Faceless, please don't. You will not be welcome. Its leaders, Zaide and Seeger, they're not changing. They're not leaving anytime soon. And they fucking hate you. Just a little PSA for anyone who watched my EverQuest movie. But whether it's EverQuest game studio or its players acting terribly, I have tried to do my best to call it out, even when I look a fool sometimes, even when it burns bridges, or even the death threats I'm risking. Because this kind of stuff needs to stop. Period. Now, I'm going to end with this because if they respond, which they'll very likely do, this is actually their playbook, Rules for Radical Saul Alinsky. They'll probably use something out of this playbook to come after me. I'm going to get ahead of it. Thank you so much for watching.
So the point of all this that I'm trying to make, when a leftist starts saying that anybody, somebody, this guy, that guy, when they start saying that this guy or that guy or the other guy is some evil, evil, evil man, when a leftist says this, you know it's a lie. When a leftist says that somebody is the worst thing ever, the worst thing since Hitler, you know that they're trying to silence him. Because it's an old tactic from Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky said that it's not enough to defeat your opponent. You have to discredit your opponent by any means necessary. You have to discredit your opponent and say any lie about him, any libel necessary for him to be completely shoved off the stage. You have to disqualify him. That's what leftists do.